All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another episode of the Facts Over Feelings podcast. I'm once again joined by my waving co-host over here, Trevor Kaufman. And we're just gonna dive right in, Trevor. I mean, we've had a good week of both basketball and football. Um, we for the first time this year, I think we've had actually significant COVID delays with these games.
Yeah.
With at the time we're filming this, we got I think, Trevor, what is it? 3 football games moved. We got the Browns, Raiders. We got the
hmm
Washington football team and the Eagles, right?
And I
And
believe the Seahawks Rams game got moved as well.
yeah, that's correct. So we got 3 games moved. Honestly, I don't really mind it. We got a
I'm good
Monday
with
and
it.
Tuesday. We got a Monday, Tuesday afternoon games. That'll be kind of fun. So looking forward to that. And at least my Browns can get some people back off the COVID list. Hopefully we get Baker off the COVID list so we don't have to play Nick Mullins. Be interesting.
He's looked good. He had a couple good games in San Francisco.
Oh man, yeah, we'll see what happens. But Trevor, it certainly will be an interesting week. And but before we got started, talking about any upcoming stuff, we wanted to first just take a step back, and look at the playoff picture, Trevor, because last week, a lot changed in the playoff picture,
It
Trevor,
did.
and honestly, particularly in the AFC. I think the AFC, Trevor, everything, both conferences have some jumbling towards the bottom of the playoff pile, but I mean the AFC, Trevor, a lot changed, so I don't
It
know
did.
if you have any comments on a specific team, or kind of anyone in the top 7, or or someone in the playoff hunt, 8 to 10, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So I actually have a lot to say about the AFC. I have a lot to say about the entire playoff picture. We'll talk about my tragic Cardinals in a second. But in the AFC, I want to highlight 2 teams. One, I want to highlight the Los Angeles Chargers and the opportunity they kind of blew last night. And I think Brandon Staley, I love the aggressive nature as him as a coach. And we won't talk about this game in depth, but Brandon Staley really blew this game for the Los Angeles Chargers. This game never needed to go to overtime. It looked like he panicked a lot on those 4th down decisions. I get being aggressive against the Kansas City Chiefs, but I felt like he made some very poor decisions in that game. And because of that, the Chargers are basically done in the division, right? They only have 3 regular season games left, and they're down by 2 games. If they would have won this game yesterday, they would have been 9-5. They would have swept Kansas City, and they would be in prime position to get a top 3 seed in the AFC and host a playoff game. Right now, they're slated to go play Baltimore, which isn't the worst thing ever. Baltimore's beat up and destroyed. But that's leading into my second team I wanted to talk about, the Baltimore Ravens. And this team, Ryan, is not going to win the division. I'm telling you that right now. They are decimated by injury. They have an incredibly hard schedule. They got to play Green Bay. They've got to play Pittsburgh again. They've got to play Cleveland again. And I honestly think Cincinnati or Cleveland might steal this division late in the season. I couldn't tell you who it's going to be, just because Cleveland has a lot of COVID issues right now, and Cincinnati's just a weird team in general.
Yeah.
But I'm going to come out here and say Baltimore's not winning this division. And if they don't
Wow.
win the division, they might not make the playoffs, because I realistically can see this team losing out. I really do. You look at their schedule. They got to play Green Bay this weekend at home, but I still think that's a loss. Then they got to go to Cincinnati. I think that's a very tough game. Then they got to play the Rams, and the Rams look really good right now. And then they got to play Pittsburgh, which is never an easy game. So for me, Baltimore is in a lot of trouble. The AFC playoff picture is very weird. Final thing I wanted to say about the AFC before I hand it over to you. Look who's back at the top. The Kansas City Chiefs, albeit momentarily, because New England and Tennessee, who are sitting at 9-4, still have to play. But the Kansas City Chiefs are back atop of the AFC. Patrick Mahomes found his stride in the 4th quarter of that game yesterday. And Kansas City right now might be the team to beat in the AFC.
Yeah, I mean, look, Trevor, look, I'm not going to dive into Kansas City too much because I've said it in weeks past. I said it last week, but they're not maybe the team to beat. They are the team to beat. And, I'm sorry, that I even second guessed that at any point this season, because, we've seen it time and time again, Trevor, for years now. We've seen that Mahomes and that offense are the best offense in the league and the most feared offense. And now with the defense playing a little bit better, I know they gave up what, Trevor, 28 points on Thursday night. But they got the job done against a really quality offense. And, I think that with the defense playing at least an adequate level, they're the best team in the AFC. I think that it's pretty clear cut. But for me, Trevor, I'm just really interested to see where this goes because you brought up the Ravens in the AFC North, and it's a good point. They don't have Lamar Jackson for Sunday, at least probably not. I know Harbaugh said there's a chance, but he didn't practice all
He didn't
week.
practice,
So even
right.
if he plays, I mean, I would be very scared if I was a Ravens fan because they're going to be gunning for him. You know, an injured Lamar, a hampered Lamar. So I don't think they'll put him out there. But that's probably a loss, Trevor. I mean, they probably don't win that game. And you talk about the rest of their schedule, you know, being pretty difficult. So point being, like, the AFC North is wide open. It's kind of crazy, Trevor, that the Cleveland Browns are in this position, really to take over this division after this week, Trevor. I mean, it truly would be unbelievable, you know, if they were able to beat the Raiders, the Ravens were to lose, and they were able to be in the driver's seat going into the final few games. It would just be a crazy turnaround.
They would take over the division then, huh? Yeah, they would. Okay.
I think so.
They would because you guys have the better divisional record.
That's right. Yeah.
As the tiebreaker.
Because Baltimore is 1-3 in the division. So yeah, I mean I think that's crazy. So you know that division is just wide open. Outside of Pittsburgh, anyone can win it. But you know a lot can change in this in the playoff picture again this week. I mean, I think for me, Trevor, I wanted to touch base on I wanted to touch base on Cincinnati because I mean I feel like. I mean, everything that's happened, Trevor, is what I said was going to happen. You remember, I said they were going to lose 2 of their next 3 games, maybe all 3. And they lost their last 2, and now they're playing Denver in Denver. And that's going to be a tough game. I mean, Denver isn't great, but they're no slouches. I mean, their defense is legit, and they're in Denver, which is a hostile environment, you know, in altitude. So, you know, we'll see how that goes. But I think since he's going to lose again, and it really is crazy. How volatile this team is. You know, one week they look like one of the top 5 teams in the league. Next week, you know, they look like one of the worst. So it's very weird. But again, like I said, they're going to need one more year. And then final thing, Trevor, I just want to say Miami's not out of it yet. They play the Jets this weekend, Trevor. And if they win, Trevor, and if stuff falls their way, they could be right there. They could be like they could easily be like an 8 seed after this week, you know, depending on who loses, you know, maybe Cincy loses, maybe the Steelers lose again, the Raiders lose, you know, the Colts lose. I don't know how the tiebreaker is going to fall, but they could be right there, Trevor, if they beat, and hopefully they do, the Jets. So, you know, don't count Miami out just yet, which it would be a remarkable turnaround, but don't count them out just yet.
I'm going to count Miami out. They're not good. They are benefiting from an easy schedule, though. I'll give you that. They are benefiting from a very easy schedule. And the AFC is just a mumbo jumbo of average to above average teams. Kansas City's probably the only borderline elite team in that conference. And as I say that, Ryan, we switch gears to the NFC playoff picture, which is very top heavy, which is full of 3 or 4, I would say right now, 2 elite teams and 2 borderline elite teams. The Packers and Tampa Bay are elite. And then I would say the Cowboys, the Rams, and my Cardinals are borderline elite teams. I think that's a fair estimate to say. The NFC playoff picture, I want to talk about my Arizona Cardinals for a sec here. And what a blown opportunity this team had last weekend. And it's been eating away at me these last 5 days, or last 4 days, I should say. You know, our number 1 seed chances went from winning that game on Monday night up to 50%. Now we're down to under 10%. And I looked at Tampa Bay and Green Bay's schedule. It's very easy the rest of the way. Green Bay's toughest game is probably Baltimore this weekend, but with the way Baltimore's been decimated, I see them winning. And Tampa Bay plays the Saints, the Panthers twice, and the Jets. So I would be very surprised if Tampa Bay did not win out. My Cardinals still have to play the Colts, who are playing good football, and we have to go to Dallas, which is going to be a very difficult game. So nightmare scenario for my Cardinals right now is I think we're going to win the division. Right, we play the Lions this weekend. I don't think we're going to slip up in the division. But a nightmare scenario for my Cardinals is we fall to the 4 seed and we have to play the Rams in the wild card. What it's looking like right now is we're probably going to be the 3 seed, and we're probably going to have to play San Francisco in the wild card, which isn't much better. So that's not good. The final thing I'm going to say about the NFC is this. And I want to talk about, who was I going to talk about? Oh, I was going to talk about the Minnesota Vikings. And I feel like, look, this team lost to Detroit and everybody kind of wrote them off. And now they're tied with Washington for the last wild card spot. And they're a good football team. When healthy, this is a very good football team. So I wouldn't be surprised if they made a little bit of a run over the stretch 4 games of this season. They sneak into the wild card. And look, they'll probably have to play a team like Tampa Bay or Green Bay in the wild card. They'll probably lose, but they're no slouches um, for a wild card game. And I think the interesting thing about this NFC playoff picture is for a while, it was just 5 teams and 2 crappy wild card teams are going to sneak in. Now it's 5 really good teams, as we've mentioned. San Francisco's playing really good football. They'll be a very tough wild card game. And I think Washington is a little bit limited, but I think Minnesota would be a very difficult wild card game as well. It would be the most winnable of the teams, but I think it would be a tough wild card game. So although the NFC is still very top heavy, I think some of these middle pack teams are playing better football here late in the season. And look, getting that #1 seed is going to be huge. And my Cardinals probably blew their chances of getting that #1 seed by playing their worst game of the season last Monday night.
Yeah, I mean, Trevor, I mean, we'll get into the specifics of this game in just a few minutes, but I mean, I agree. I think that the 1 seed is out of reach at this point. I mean, I don't know. The Packers and the Bucs are just playing really good football, easy schedules, as you said,
Easy
especially
schedule.
the Buccaneers. And they're both
Super
undefeated at
easy.
home, Trevor. So, I mean, every home game here, I mean, I think is pretty much a guaranteed win with an easier schedule at this point in the season. So I think it's going to be hard to surpass both of them. But Trevor, the team I wanted to talk about in the NFC was the 49ers. Okay. And you know, I wanted to talk about them because I think this team is dangerous, Trevor. I think this
They
team is
are.
dangerous. And
They're slated to play my Cardinals wild card weekend.
I mean, man, I mean, I look at this team and I don't know. Jimmy G just maybe I'm just forgetting, but he seems more poised, you know, more composed and just a better player than he was a couple of years ago. You know, I look at him, dude, and he's making big time throws. He has a solid pocket presence. He knows where to maneuver in the pocket, and he's throwing the ball down the field. I mean, I don't know, Trevor. I was watching the Cincinnati game, and he was making some big time plays. You know, he drove his team down the field multiple times in that game, both in the fourth quarter and in overtime, to clutch up and win that game. I mean, you know, and average quarterbacks, I don't think can do that. I mean, Cincy's defense isn't horrible now. I mean, it's definitely improved, especially their front seven. And, you know, to do that in crunch time twice, I mean, he's taken some strides forward. I mean, seriously. So with Jimmy G having taken some strides forward, you know, and with, you know, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk, I mean, that's an elite that's an elite cast of receivers right there, Trevor. I mean, that's really nice. I mean, we both saw Brandon Ayuk's play to win them the game. I mean, that was a great play. I mean, that was just he somehow got to the pylon and won that game for them. And it was just the team played really well down the stretch, and they're playing really good football right now. I think, Trevor, that this team could not only win a playoff game, I think they could easily actually, you know, depending on matchups, get all the way to the title game. I mean, I really do. This team has a solid defense, a really good head coach, and good offensive weapons with a quarterback who has definitely improved this year. So as long as health isn't an issue, which it was last year, like massively, I think this team really could win a couple of playoff games, maybe get into that NFC title game if the matchups fall into place for them. And yeah, I've been impressed with them the last few weeks, and I think they're dangerous.
I think you're overrating them a little bit. I'll be honest with you. I saw them play against Seattle, the way they gave that game away. I've seen their defense on multiple occasions this year. Their secondary has been struggling for sure. They have a good front seven. I will give you that. Their front seven gets after the quarterback. They have a nice cast of linebackers led by Fred Warner. Deebo Samuel has had a great year. I think the biggest thing for the San Francisco team was finally getting George Kittle healthy. And it took him a couple weeks to kind of get into the flow of things. But this guy is a difference maker, Ryan. I mean, we've looked at his last 2 games receiving, particularly the game last weekend. I think he had 180 receiving yards and a touchdown against the Cincinnati Bengals last weekend. So for me, he's always been Jimmy G's favorite target. He's also the best run blocking tight end in the NFL. He is an excellent blocker. He's an excellent route runner. He's also very underrated. He is a pretty fast guy for his speed, and he is tough to tackle in open space. He runs you over. He can get by you if you take a poor angle. So for me, I think George Kittle has been the difference for this San Francisco offense. He is Jimmy G's security blanket, and he opens things up for other guys like Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Remember Brandon Ayuk early in the year? He was non-existent, no targets, very few catches. And all of a sudden, Brandon Ayuk's really come along in the last few games. Is that a coincidence? Maybe, but I think it's George Kittle opening things up for him. And finally, San Francisco's always had a good running game. Kyle Shanahan, I think the strength of his offense is his running scheme, no matter who the running back is. Raheem Mostert, Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, Jeff Wilson Jr., whoever his damn running back is, he throws them in and they seem to have success. So, look, I agree with you. If I'm a Cardinals fan right now, I do not want to play San Francisco wild card weekend. Please give me Washington or Atlanta or the number 1 seed. But as I've said already, we blew our chance at the number 1 seed. So now we're probably going to have to play a team like Minnesota or San Francisco, who is very, very tough. And look, when you beat a team twice, it's hard to beat them a third time. And having to beat San Francisco a third time would be a nightmare scenario. But I'm glad you brought up San Francisco because they're worth talking about.
Yeah, no, for sure. And just one last thing before we move on, Trevor, I just want to say that there are, again, some massive divisional games this weekend. I mean, we have San Francisco and Atlanta going at it, which is a really big game. And we have Washington and Philly as well. So, I mean, those two right there
Huge games
are both really big games. And, as a Cardinals fan, I mean, I'd probably personally be rooting for what? Atlanta and Philly? I would be. I mean, I'd rather play both of those teams.
I would much rather play Atlanta, Philly, or Washington. Any of those 3 teams. I do not want to play. Hopefully we can avoid the 4 spot and not have to play the Rams. But in terms of being the 3 seed, I just hope we can avoid Minnesota or San Francisco. Those would be very, very tough teams to beat, especially since we're not healthy right now either. So that's a sign of concern. But
can I ask you a question before we move on? Are there any 6 and 7 teams here? We got Washington, Minnesota, Philly, Atlanta, and New Orleans. Do any of those teams make you at all nervous?
Minnesota does. Just because they play better than their record. The other teams who you listed off, Washington, I believe you said New Orleans,
Philly, New Orleans, Atlanta.
Yep. To me, I wouldn't be. Look, it's a playoff game. You're always a little bit nervous, but to me, I would feel pretty good if we played any of those teams in a wild card game. I would feel much better about any of those matchups versus a Minnesota or a Washington, to a lesser extent, or a San Francisco.
Okay, because I wanted to ask, because I agree. I think Minnesota's the one team there that I'm like, I wouldn't really want them to make the playoffs because sure, they find ways to seemingly choke all these close games, but the fact that they're all really close games and they're
always in the game. They should have beat my Cardinals week 2.
Yeah, they should have. Yeah, they have the offensive firepower to beat anyone in the league. They really do. Yeah, okay. So I agree with you. I'm glad we talked about that because I 100% agree about Minnesota.
I think I read a stat. I don't know if they were ever up by 7 points against the Detroit Lions, but I think they're the only team in the NFL who's led every NFL game they've played this year by 7 points. But I don't know if they ever led by 7 against the Lions. That's the one game I can't remember. But remember the game against the Steelers, they were up 30-0, right? Like this team is very capable of putting together football games.
Yeah.
They just seem to find ways to lose games, which is odd. But regardless, hopefully something happens to Tampa Bay and Green Bay, Ryan, for my Cardinals' sake. And your Browns are also in it as well. So we shouldn't be counting your Browns out either.
100%.
With that being said, Ryan, I think we're going to talk more about my Cardinals here. I wanted to hear your thoughts from the Monday night game between the Rams and Arizona.
I mean, look, Trevor, I honestly, when I look at this game, I have a few takeaways. First, the Rams offense is legit. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, a lot of those plays were bang plays, really close plays. The most obvious one was that Cooper Kupp touchdown in the right corner of the end zone.
Just great throws.
I mean, that was ridiculous. OBJ looked great. Van Jefferson looking good. Pat myself on the back. I said Van Jefferson would be nice. It took him a year, but I mean, this guy's having a good season. And he's a deep threat. He's a legitimate deep threat, Trevor. And, he's having a good year. He's having a good overall season. So he's been playing well. So that offense is firing on all cylinders. And the other two takeaways I have, James Conner is a steal. I mean, I think we all know this by now, but I didn't really know until I watched him here on primetime. And I'm looking at this guy, and
He's
he's
incredible.
making one-handed catches out of the backfield, running actual receiver routes sometimes. And I'm like, who is this guy? I thought they were just going to use him as a kind of head down, nose to the grindstone type guy,
That's
around the
what we
goal
thought
line in
as
the red
well.
zone. And I mean, look at him.
Hmm.
I mean, he's a versatile back. I mean, I guess we forgot what a healthy James Conner could do, and clearly so did Pittsburgh. I mean, they drafted a guy in the first round when they could have kept James Conner for $2 million. So I mean, kudos to James Conner. He is legit, at least this season. And yeah, I mean, he's good for them. And the other takeaway I had is that Kyler Murray he struggled a little bit. I mean, in my opinion, I mean, sure, he had 380 passing yards. And
Hmm.
granted, I didn't watch the fourth quarter of this game because I thought it was pretty much, I thought it was
Over.
pretty much over. The score is a lot closer than it actually was, in my opinion. I don't think it played like a 7-point game for a good portion of that
Hmm.
middle of that game. But he's just making a few too many mistakes, especially that second interception, Trevor. I thought
Yeah, that was a head
it was a
scratcher.
big, big mistake. And all quarterbacks do it. But the point here is, can the Cardinals win, Trevor, with Kyler playing mediocre? And the answer here, at least from this game, is I don't know. I mean, right, 380 yards and 2 picks and, no touchdowns. I mean, that's pretty mediocre. I don't
Hmm.
know. Can they win with Kyler playing like, maybe a slightly above average or even average quarterback? So that's a question that I want answered. And also just like a thing, Trevor, and you can touch on this more because you've watched more Kyler obviously than I have. But when I watch Kyler, at least a handful of times a game, Trevor, I feel like he's throwing off of his back foot, and
Oh, he
um,
definitely is.
and a lot of times it works. And credit him, he has the arm strength to do it. But to me, it's like a lot of times he does it when he doesn't need to, and I don't know if you think like it's something that he should correct. If you like, does it bother you watching him just like falling away, throwing off his back foot? It seems really risky. I don't know. Like, I don't know what you think on it. Can he pull it off consistently? I don't know.
Hmm.
It seems kind of strange to me. It would make me a little bit nervous.
That's a fair critique. I think your Kyler critiques are fair to an extent. I have a few main takeaways from this game. One,
Yeah.
I'll start with the Rams. Matthew Stafford played an unbelievable football game. Cooper Kupp is arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL.
Yep.
And Odell Beckham Jr. found his home in Los Angeles. He had a really, really nice game for them. Him in the number 2 role for this team, I think, fits perfectly. He gets a lot of one-on-one looks from a team's second corner just because the emphasis is on Cooper Kupp. And OBJ one-on-one with a team's second corner or a third corner, that's a favorable matchup for the Rams. My second main takeaway was this. It's kind of a couple things looped into one. The Rams defensive line completely dominated this football game. Aaron Donald dominated this football game. 3 sacks, right? I believe Leonard Floyd had a sack as well.
Yep.
And for me, that's a worry as a Cardinals fan because there have been 3 games this year the Cardinals have lost. And they've all lost these games in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Against the Green Bay Packers, it was the defense not being able to stop the run, getting pushed around up front. Against Carolina, that was just a bad game in general, but you saw Carolina's defensive line get after us, and you saw them be able to establish the run game as well with McCaffrey. And then in this game, once again, the Rams just asserting their dominance at the line of scrimmage, out physicaling, if that's even a word, my Arizona Cardinals. We had no ability to get the run game going. Kyler Murray was under duress all night. That's partially the reason why he was throwing off his back foot, is because there were guys running at him
Fair.
and he kind of just threw it up. And in the first quarter, he missed 2 guys because of it. And it's a little frustrating because now it's happened 3 times, right? There's clearly a blueprint to beating this football team, and I'm just worried that it's going to get exposed. Hopefully, the coaching staff, Cliff in general, addresses it. But now we're losing a lot of key pieces. Rodney Hudson, starting center, not going to play on Sunday. DeAndre Hopkins is probably out for the season. James Conner probably will not play on Sunday. So this team is heading in the wrong direction. Maybe it was just a bad game, but there's definitely a lot to be worried about. I've already touched on the playoff picture. So the final thing I wanted to talk about was this secondary. And I'm just a little concerned from the perspective of if we make a deep playoff run, who we're going to run into. I thought the secondary had been great all year, and they had been. Marco Wilson had been really good. Byron Murphy had been really good. I love our safeties, Jalen Thompson and Buda Baker. But I saw what happened to him last night against a competent receiving core with a good quarterback, and they got exposed. A couple of those throws were just tremendous plays by Stafford.
True.
But I look up, and who are the two teams in front of my Cardinals, right? Arguably the two best quarterbacks of maybe all time, definitely the best quarterback of all time, Tom Brady, with an absolutely loaded cast of receivers. And you have Aaron Rodgers, who has been playing great football all year, and he's going to have Devontae Adams, and he's going to have his running backs, and he's going to have, his other receivers, Valdez Scantling and maybe Lazard.
Sure.
So I'm worried about the secondary come playoff time. I'm not worried about Kyler. I actually thought he played pretty well yesterday. I blame that game more on the offensive line. If anything, I will admit that second interception was definitely a head scratcher.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one was just a great play by Aaron Donald, of course, who tips the pass at the line of scrimmage. So for me, final thing is my Cardinals they just blew their chance to get a number one seed. And I just feel like a legitimate shot at the Super Bowl went with it. I'm not saying we can't make the Super Bowl now, but it just became a lot harder because we're probably going to have to play 2 road playoff games and a third wild card game. So I really thought last night was our chance to really show the NFL that we're a legit contender in the NFC. We're the best team in the NFL. And I just, we put together a poor performance on all sides of the ball, except for our kicker, Matt Prater, who played a great game. And I just felt like it was kind of like a gut-wrenching loss. Could be overreacting, but I just, it eats at me because I thought this was really our chance to kind of like show the world what we can do. And we blew it. So it hurts a little bit, but that's all I got to say. I know it was a lot. So
No, I think a lot of it was good. I mean, Trevor, I agree. I mean, I don't have too much to add other than I think it's gut-wrenching because, of what happened afterwards. I mean, especially just DeAndre Hopkins being ruled out for the remainder of the regular season. True. I mean, that's hard. I mean, as you said, the bye week, you told me this off the air, the bye week's really important, not only just for the team, but for someone like D-Hop, right? Like getting that bye week would be massive to be able to probably or hopefully come back for that first playoff game. Now that you probably won't be getting that, I mean, you won't have Hopkins for that first playoff game, for that wild card game. So that's definitely a game changer. And let's be honest here, you guys play the Lions, but after that, I mean, there is not a single game in the final 3 that's a cakewalk. I mean, you play the Colts, they're playing good football right now.
They're playing good football.
I mean, you've talked about it, especially the Cowboys in
Cowboys
Dallas.
Game is going to be a huge game.
That's a big game. I know for months you've been saying like that's going to be the toughest game remaining on our schedule. Outside of the Rams game. I mean, right? You've been saying that's an important game, a big game. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a big one. And then Seattle. I mean, look, Seattle's not great this year, but with that offense, you never know. Right, you got.
And
Russell
Seattle's
Wilson.
Not out of the playoffs. Seattle's not. They might.
Isn't that crazy?
Have a meaningful
Trevor,
game week 18.
They're 5-8, and they're still in the hunt. I mean, that's crazy.
They're one game out of a wild card spot.
Unbelievable. But So I mean, there's not another game outside of the Detroit game that's really a penciled in win. So for me, Trevor, I mean, this was a big game because I could easily see Trevor, and not that I'm predicting this, but the Cardinals could easily finish the season 11-6. I mean, it's definitely a possibility.
It could happen.
So, I mean, that game against the Rams was a big one. I definitely agree. So, especially with the D-Hop injury, it's something that I'd be a little bbit, I definitely see the disappointment, the frustration with it. But I wouldn't be too worried. I mean, I think you'll end up being the 3 seed. I think you'll end up probably going 3-1 or 2-2 the rest of the way at worst. And I think you'll be just fine. And I think it'll all be okay. But that 1 seed is, I think, out of reach at this point. So that will be interesting. But I don't know, Trevor, if you have anything you want to say about the Cardinals again before we move on.
I've gotten everything I need to say.
Good. Yeah, no, that's good stuff. With that, Trevor, we're going to move on to the other game that we want to talk about, the game that I wanted to talk about. And, we've talked about both of these teams already, but I want to talk about this game specifically, which is the San Francisco 49ers and the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, Trevor, this game was probably the best game of the weekend, in my opinion. I mean, this game or the Bucks-Bills game, both of those games were sensational in that late afternoon window. And this game just reeked of two, kind of desperate teams, just, giving it their all. I mean, these teams they they played hard. I mean, they made big plays. Both of them did. And at the end of the day, one team made more plays than the other. More specifically, George Kittle made more plays than the other team. I mean, this guy, Trevor, 13 catches for 151 yards. And I don't know how many he had in the fourth quarter in OT, but when I was watching, it had to have been at least 6 or 7 catches. I mean, the guy was simply unbelievable towards the end of that game. Absolutely put the team on his back. And they still won this game, Trevor, with a Robbie Gould missed 40-yard field goal. I mean, let's not forget, he missed like a 40-yarder. I mean, they should have, been able to be up in this game, late, but he missed the field goal, which was just, absolutely brutal. A lesser team could have easily folded, when something like that happened, right? Maybe a more inexperienced team, a team that hadn't been there before, could have folded, but they didn't. They bounced back and got the job done. And I don't know, Trevor. I like I said, San Francisco's a scary team. At least they're becoming one. And the Bengals are trending the way I thought they would. Joe Burrow's good. He didn't turn the ball over, or at least he didn't throw any interceptions. And he had he had a clutch throw to Jamar Chase in the fourth quarter there. But I don't know. I think at the end of the day, as I said, this team needs one more year. And, it seems like that's going to be the way. They've got an amazing duo in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Nothing else needs to be said. I really like the way T. Higgins has been playing lately. I actually, think he's flown under the radar significantly with Jamar Chase's emergence. Like, he had a slow start to the year. He was hurt a little bit, but he's been really good these last couple of weeks, and he clutched up. He had 114 yards on 5 catches this past Sunday. So, he's playing well to close out the season. And yeah, both of these teams are nice, but I just think one has the experience, and I think that's what's going to propel the Niners to the playoffs, and the Bengals not, because I don't think they quite have the experience and the time in terms of game in close games late in the season. With the division on the line, teams not kind of overlooking you. Teams actually just not that they didn't before, but they're really like looking hard at Cincinnati now. That's not just another game on the schedule. That's a team that people are like, wait, hold on a second. Like, this is a decent team. So, I know you always talk about the whole, underdogs versus, being, an actual feared team or a respected team, how the different mindsets change, kind of how a team plays. And I think that's kind of being the case for Cincinnati at this point in the season.
I agree with you there, particularly on the last point. And yeah, I'll touch on that a little bit, right? It's a lot easier to play football games when nothing's expected of your team. You can just go out there, play freely. And, being an underdog, it feels really good because when you win, there's all the praise in the world. And then when you lose, it's like, okay, we were in an underdog, right? It's kind of a win-win situation. Versus Cincinnati, right? When they beat Baltimore, they get to 5-2. All of a sudden, they become one of those teams where there's pressure and there's expectation. And that changes the mindset, not only for your opponent, but for you internally. And when you win, it becomes more of an expectation. And when you lose, it becomes more of like what happened, right? That shouldn't be happening. So I thought that was a very interesting point you brought up. With all that being said, I feel like the difference of this game was 2 muff punts by Cincinnati. And my man, Darius Phillips, I hope he didn't receive any mean tweets on Twitter. I'm sure he got some nasty comments, but I think those 2 muff punts were just killer for Cincinnati. I believe it led to at least 7, maybe 10 San Francisco points. So if Cincinnati doesn't if Cincinnati doesn't have those 2 turnovers, right, they probably win this football game. They're 8-5, and they're sitting really good to get a wild card spot, especially how everything's shaping out with the Chargers losing yesterday. The Bills are 7-6. The Browns are 7-6. So this was just kind of like one of those games where it was 2 really even teams, and Cincinnati made the 2 mistakes, and that's why they ended up losing.
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well. And I don't have too much else to add. At the end of the day, I think one's a playoff team, one's not. So we'll see if I'm proven right. But at the end of the day, this is like as I said earlier, this is a really good game, and it was fun to watch these 2 teams. But Trevor, I don't know if you have anything else you want to talk about in the NFL, but if not, I think we can kind of move on to talk about a little bit of NBA before we wrap this podcast up. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right. So, we can dive right in. Trevor, I was actually going to, jump this over to you real quick first, if that's okay. I know you wanted to talk about the Memphis Grizzlies a little bit this week. And I'm assuming it's because of how well they're playing without their star, Ja Morant.
Yeah, that's exactly why I wanted to talk about them,
Yeah.
Ryan. They are on a roll right now. They have won
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They've won 9 of their last 10 games, and most of those have been without Ja Morant. And it's because of guys like Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson, Dylan Brooks. I mean, it's been a complete team effort by the Memphis Grizzlies. And this leads into another conversation that you and I kind of had a little bit briefly off the air,
Mm.
right? Some of these great individual basketball players, you look at
Yes.
guys like Bradley Beal, Jason Tatum, Ja Morant. Although to him, I still think Ja Morant doesn't quite fit into this category yet. He's still young. Russell Westbrook, James Harden, right? These guys are unbelievable individual talents, and maybe James Harden a little less so. But like I said, they're unbelievable individual talents, but they don't necessarily. Kyrie Irving is another great example. They don't necessarily translate to more team wins. I look at multiple examples of this with these players. Russell Westbrook leaves. The Washington Wizards get better the next year. Kyrie Irving gets injured, right? The deepest playoff run of the Kyrie Irving Boston Celtic era was without Kyrie Irving. Ja Morant goes down now, and all of a sudden the Memphis Grizzlies can't lose, and they're beating pretty good teams. They blow out Philadelphia. They beat the Lakers. They beat the Heat, right? So for me, it's just weird because Ja Morant is such a good talent and he's such a fun player to watch. Is he one of those guys where, he's a great individual player, but he might be holding the team aspect of the team back a little bit? I don't know. When I watch them play with Ja Morant, he is used every possession. They basically run a screen and roll with Ja, and he's either going to, go inside for a floater, maybe a dunk, maybe pull up. He's either going to hand it off to a big guy, or if they trap him, double him, he's going to kick it out to somebody and they're going to take a shot. So maybe I actually haven't watched them a lot without Ja Morant in the lineup. What it seems to be with me is there's more ball movement. There's more team assists when he's out of the lineup. There's more of a scoring dispersion between more players when Ja Morant's out of the lineup, right? More guys are getting more points per game. So for Memphis, it's something they should definitely look at long term, right? Is this the guy? Is Ja Morant our guy? Like, is this our franchise player?
Sure.
I don't know. The way they're playing right now, it makes it a little bit interesting. So
Yeah, I mean, look, Trevor, look, I'm glad you talked about the Grizzlies because, the conversation you and I had, I think was exactly on point. Look, here at the end of the day, look, like, I could go look at the advanced numbers and I honestly bet that they would probably back me up here. At the end of the day, there are some guys, and Trevor highlighted Russell Westbrook. I totally agree. You highlight guys like Bradley Beal. You highlight certain players. Kyrie Irving is a fantastic example. These guys are sensational, maybe some of them even Hall of Fame talents, Trevor. But at the end of the day, there are certain styles of basketball that lead to more wins and others that are just a little more flash. And I think that right now, what we're seeing from the Grizzlies, and maybe they're just playing hot basketball. Maybe Desmond Bane's just playing really, really well in this stretch of games.
And he is.
And he is. He's having a great breakout season, by the way. But maybe like a couple guys are just stepping up big time, and that's why they're playing better. But I mean, this is a sustained stretch. I mean, 9 of their last 10 that's a decent chunk of games, Trevor, and that's all without Ja Morant. I think some guys just make more of an impact on wins and losses than others. And what I told Trevor, and this is, Trevor's going to laugh, but seriously, Ja Morant versus a guy like Darius Garland. The guy's super young, but Darius Garland's style of basketball has led the Cavs to a lot more wins than they otherwise would have if they had a guy like Russell Westbrook leading the point.
Fair point.
And getting guys involved as often as he does. And it's not just about the assist numbers, it's about just not dribbling the air out of the basketball, right? Every possession, Trevor, when Ja's there, Ja is handling the ball, right? It's in Ja's hand for probably at least, nearly every possession and probably for, a good chunk of that shot clock every possession, right? So he's a dominant ball handler. And a lot of times, a more stagnant offense doesn't work and doesn't typically lead to more wins, right? So, Ja's one of the most explosive guys in the league. We all know that. He's one of the most electric players in the league. We all know that. Most athletic players
And
in
he
the
was
league.
having a really good season before he got injured.
And he was having an elite season. We were talking about before his injury of him being in the low end MVP conversation. I mean, the guy was having a sensational season. But at the end of the day, you have to look at the team without him. And it's like, okay, man, like, how much of an impact is he having just himself on wins? And right now, it doesn't seem like they've slowed down without him. They've actually, won more without him. And by no means am I saying that they shouldn't have John Morant on their team or anything. But the point here is only to say that certain guys, have more of an impact on these wins and losses. And I think it's a really interesting thing to look at. And we'll see if that is consistent throughout Ja's, career and as the years go on. But right now, I think it's totally a fair thing to say, right? Like, it's totally fair that without Ja, the ball's moving more. More guys are getting involved. It's not just more of a one-man style show.
Right.
And, it's a more dynamic offense because you don't know who's going to be handling the ball, who's going to be shooting it. And I think that makes for, it can lead to more team wins. And as we're seeing right now. So, at the end of the day, certain guys have more winning styles of play than others. And Ja might fall into that former category of Kyrie, Russell Westbrook, and Bradley Beal, that type of player. We will see, though. I mean, a guy like him can easily be a second option on a championship team, but maybe not a primary one.
Real quick before we move on, I have two things to say. One, Ja Morant does need to improve his outside shot. I think that is important. Number two, I'm going to defend him here a little bit. And this is what we see with teams sometimes in the regular season. We saw it with Denver last year. Jamal Murray goes down. All of a sudden, they're a better team without him, right? They win more games. They have a better record percentage-wise when Jamal Murray's out versus when he comes back into the lineup, and then they get swept by my Phoenix Suns in the playoffs. So I think the Grizzlies can get away with this more in the regular season, but when it comes to playoff time, you do need an elite player like a Ja Morant, like a James Harden, who kind of fits this category a little bit. So we'll see. Maybe this is just a regular season thing the Grizzlies are on right now, but they are playing great basketball. And I think the coolest thing about it is, right, I'll go to my Phoenix Suns, for example. It's one guy getting all the assists. Chris Paul gets 12 or 13 assists a game. I'm looking at the Grizzlies box scores, and it's guys like Dylan Brooks who gets 6 assists. Desmond Bane has 4 assists. D'Anthony Melton has 3 assists. Tyus Jones has 3 assists. Kyle Anderson has 3 assists. It's everybody passing the ball to everybody. And at the end of the day, that is the best way to win games in the regular season.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think the Denver comparison is pretty fair. It's like, right, Denver played better without Jamal, but are they really better without Jamal Murray? Like, let's not pretend, right? But again, I think that the larger point still stands, right? I mean, at the end of the day, some of these stars have a bigger impact on wins than others, right? So,
they do.
Maybe he doesn't have, a super, massive impact like, a Chris Paul, right? Which we can both agree, Trevor. Chris Paul is one of the biggest impacts out of any player in the NBA in terms of wins and losses, not necessarily raw numbers, right?
100%.
So, there are different types of players like that. And I think that, Ja might fall into that, more former category. But you're right. Like, let's not pretend that the Grizzlies are better without Ja Morant, right? Like, they're a better team with Ja. It's just, at the end of the day, he might not have as big of an impact on these wins and losses as, a Jimmy Butler, a Chris Paul, and to a lesser extent, young guys like Darius Garland or the like that, right? So, I think that, I don't know. I think there are some good points that we made here. And I don't know. I don't have anything else to add on it, but, as long as you don't, I can move on to my team, Trevor, that I want to talk about. And I want to talk about the Utah Jazz. And honestly,
this is what Utah does in the playoffs.
honestly, Trevor, it's what I've come to, feel like when I see this team, every night. It's like, okay, like it's the same old, right? I mean,
and they lost tonight, so there we go.
They did just lose to the Spurs, which, like, okay, you just won 9 of your last 10, 8 in a row, and you lose to the Spurs. Kind of weird. But regardless, Trevor, I mean, look, I wanted to talk about this team because of how remarkably similar they are year over year, Trevor. I mean, they're 20-8 now.
Very similar.
And they're first in the NBA in three-pointers attempted, three-pointers made,
which
field
they
goal
were
percentage.
last year
first
in the regular season.
They're third in three-point percentage. They're first in two-point percentage. They're number 1 in points scored, number 4 in points allowed. I mean, they're number 1, top 5 in nearly every major category. Number 1 in rebounds, defensive rebounds, team rebounds, number 1 in assists allowed per game. I mean, nearly every category, Trevor. They're just absolutely dominating on both ends. And, it's just weird because I don't feel any differently about this team than I did earlier in the year, last year, even a year and a half ago, right? I mean, we both know, Trevor, this team's MO, one of the best regular season teams that just fades in the playoffs. And, I really don't know how else to put it. Yeah, you go ahead in just a second. But really, ever since that 3-1 loss to Denver in the bubble, Trevor, I just I feel like this team's just kind of been the same, so close yet so far, right? They do so well, they flourish so much in the regular season, only to just not get over the hump in the playoffs. And I really don't know what it is. It's just
I'll tell you exactly why this team fades in the playoffs.
I mean, you could say Rudy Gobert, and I don't know if that's what you're going to say, but we can get into that in a second.
No, it's not. But
okay, well, I think that's part of it. And I think the other part of it is just at the end of the day, some teams just find a way to not win the big game. It's similar to the Falcons, how they've been for years, similar to the Vikings, how they've been for years. Some teams just find a way to lose the big game. And that might be the Utah Jazz, Trevor. That might be them. But I really don't know. I mean, it seems like you look at them on paper and even watch them in the regular season, you think they're a very scary team that can defend really well as a team, and a team that can score in volumes on the other end. A lot of shooters, a great rebounding team. I don't know. Trevor, I actually want to hear this, Trevor, because at the end of the day, for me, it's just you kind of shrug your shoulders.
I'm about to tell you.
Shrug your shoulders and you go, this team just doesn't show up in the playoffs.
Ryan, I'm about to tell you, and I'm going to be able to connect this to the Denver Nuggets team in the bubble versus the Denver Nuggets team without Jamal Murray, right?
Okay.
What does every great, at least to my recent memory, and let's go back to last year for a second.
Okay.
Every playoff team that goes deep in the playoffs and that wins playoff games has to have 2 bucket getters, 2 guys who can get you a bucket without the use of a system or a play or coaching or play design, right? Utah has 1, and that works in the regular season. System, offensive game plan, all that stuff, that is regular season stuff right there. But when teams lock in on defense in the playoffs and games get more physical and refs start calling less fouls and teams start running you off the 3-point line a little bit harder, you need 2 guys who can get you a bucket at any point in the game. Utah has 1. It's Donovan Mitchell. Tell me, who is their second with consistency? Jordan Clarkson, I wouldn't say he's a number 2 on a championship team. Mike Conley, Bogdanovich doesn't really get you. Can he get you a bucket when you need one, right? Or is he more of a guy where if you set him up and he gets open, he can hit a shot? You know what I mean? Utah doesn't have 2 elite bucket getters. They have 1. Look at my Phoenix Suns. Chris Paul and Devin Booker can get you a bucket whenever you want. Look at the Milwaukee Bucks last year. Giannis, Middleton. Look at the Los Angeles Clippers last year. It was Paul George and Reggie Jackson, and it would have been Kawhi Leonard as well if he stayed healthy, right? Every team, look at the Lakers championship team in the bubble. It was LeBron and Anthony Davis. Every team needs 2 elite bucket getters. And that points me to my Denver example. And this is why we shouldn't fall in love with the Grizzlies, even though I wanted to highlight them. And this is why we shouldn't fall in love with Denver without Jamal Murray. Denver, like I said, you can get away with system. You can get away with, having good play design in the regular season. But why did Denver get further in the playoffs in the bubble than they did last year without Jamal Murray? It's because Jamal Murray and Jokic can get you a bucket when you need a bucket. And when teams clamp down on defense, as I've said, you need 2 options to score the basketball. And last year we saw without Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic couldn't do it all by himself. They didn't have a number 2 who could consistently go get you a bucket. And I'm not counting Michael Porter Jr. because he doesn't create for himself yet. He relies on others to get him the ball, and he relies on screens, and he relies on offensive play design to get him open shots. Same thing with Bogdanovich. Same thing with, the Grizzlies right now. And that is why I've never been a believer of this Utah team in the postseason. And that is why I could not care less what they do in the regular season this year. They will be a first or second round exit in the playoffs once again.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have too much else to add other than I will say for me, like the only other guy on that team, Trevor, who I think could go get himself a bucket is Bogdanovich. I really think he can. But the problem with Bogdanovich is it's inconsistent, right? I mean, Trevor, do you
Exactly.
remember? I don't know if you remember last year when they were playing the Grizzlies. Donovan Mitchell wasn't playing,
Think
and
about it, the one game he didn't play in that series, they lost at home.
true. But I believe it was that series, Trevor, or maybe it was their next series. But Bogdanovich went off for some 30 odd points. It must have been 30 or 35 points. I mean, the guy was absolutely sensational. But the point, and he was creating for himself. But the point is he was only doing that because he was red hot,
Maybe it was one.
right?
Right.
So here's the thing: like they don't have a reliable second bucket getter who can create for himself. You're right, Jordan Clarkson. Look, look, he's a good player, right? He's a good
He
shooter.
plays a great role for this team.
But at the end of the day,
But he's
Trevor,
not a
like,
number 2 bucket
to
getter.
me, he disappears in the playoffs. Maybe I'm biased for my 2018 Cav days because he was horrible. But like, to me, he's not a guy that I look at in the playoffs and go like he can get me a bucket when I need it. Like I don't look at Jordan Clarkson that way.
Exactly.
And so I think that this kind of furthers your point, and you're right. So maybe that's what they need, Trevor. Maybe they need another bucket getter, a go-to guy who can just get them a timely bucket when they need it. Because at the end of the day, one guy can't do it all. And maybe he can do it in the regular season, but one guy like Donovan Mitchell, as good as he is, and he is one of the best players in the entire league, he can't get them all the way to the Western Conference Finals or the NBA Finals by himself in terms of facilitating scoring. He can't do it. So you just need other consistent scoring or other consistent shot creation, I should say. And, I think it's a really good point you brought up because, I mean, they don't have that. So, we'll see if maybe they can make a play for a trade. I don't think they will. They seem like a very content with the team they have.
And they have a good team.
And look,
they have a great head coach as well.
What is it, Trevor? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Quinn Snyder or right? It is. Right?
It's Quinn Snyder. Yeah, it's Quinn Snyder.
I think he's a good head coach. I mean, I don't think people disrespect him, but people shouldn't disrespect him if they try to, because I think he's a really good
head coach.
And does a great job at making adjustments. I think he's a really good head coach. And he's just kind of stuck with Rudy Gobert in terms of matchup problems. So that's not really, I don't know. It's not something I can put on him too much. But yeah, I mean, this team has everything you want on paper. It's just sometimes, Trevor, when it comes down to it, some of these teams, who don't have multiple shot creators can't get it done come playoff time.
I'm telling you, Ryan, right now, they're going to lose probably in the second round. I think they're good enough. If they can get a top 3 seed, they'll get a bit of a lower end playoff team. They'll probably get like a Dallas, or, I mean, they might end up playing the Lakers or the Clippers, which would be a very dangerous first round matchup. Could play Denver as well. So you know what? The way the West is shaping out, there's no guarantee they get out of the first round. But if they do happen to get like a top 2 seed, they'll get out of the playoffs just because they're just a better team. But when they run into a team with guys with more bucket getters than they have, they're going to lose. And I'm telling you, this team is not going to the Western Conference Finals this year. I would sell short on the Utah Jazz, and I would put all my stock into the Phoenix Suns. And when Klay Thompson comes back, I would put 99% of my stock in the Suns. Will put the other 1% in the Warriors.
Okay. Wow. Well, look, Trevor, that's going to be a conversation for around Christmas time. Next week's podcast, maybe we talk about the Suns and the Warriors, rehash that debate, Trevor, because we both know the Warriors are the better team, but that's a story for another week, another podcast. Maybe we'll save that for episode number 70.
This will be a debate for the next 6 months, unfortunately.
It will, but, everyone knows it shouldn't be a debate. The Warriors are the team to beat. Klay Thompson, James Wiseman make this. I mean,
oh my God.
I mean, hey, look, you go look at everyone's comments, when everyone's talking about Klay coming back, they're all saying it, the league's over, the West is done, barring injury. I agree. But look, Trevor, we'll see what happens. Maybe your Phoenix Suns can hold them off, but I have my doubts. But Trevor, I mean, look, that's all I have for this podcast. I don't have any shout outs unless you have a shout out or two you want to make before we head off.
Do I have a shout out? I do have one shout out actually, Ryan.
Go ahead.
Two shout outs. I'm going to shout out myself.
Okay.
I hit a pretty fun little bet tonight. I bet on in the Milwaukee Bucks New Orleans Pelicans game. I bet on who would score the first bucket of the game, and I guessed it would be Herbert Jones. And Herbert Jones made the first dunk of the game. And it paid out 20 times the money that I bet. So kudos to me.
Please give a round of applause for Trevor's gambling addiction. Thank you, folks. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, Trevor, what's this next shout out you got?
The second one is a more legit shout out. I want to shout out Jackson State with Coach Primetime Deion Sanders, who just flipped the number 2 player in college football. His name is Travis Hunter, or I should say the number 2 high school recruit in college football is going to an HBCU. And I don't know why this kid's getting a lot of crap for it. I actually think it's a good, I'm not saying it's a great decision.
I mean, it's an FCS school.
But the point being here is, one, HBCUs have a lot of good NFL players over the years. You look at guys like Jerry Rice, Shannon Sharp, Michael Strahan. Number 2, if you're trying to get to the NFL and the position that he plays wide receiver and corner, who would you rather be coached by than Deion Sanders, who is the greatest cornerback of all time? I think it's a perfectly fair decision. I get they're an FCS team, but Ryan, Jackson State has now stolen 4 ESPN top 300 recruits in the last 2 years. This is a real football team, and Deion Sanders is building a real program down there. I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled some kind of upset against a high-ranked Power 5 team in the next couple of years. They are getting some really, really good football players, and I love his energy. I love his passion, and I'm happy for the HBCU, Jackson State, and I think Travis Hunter made a very good decision here based on the position he plays, the coach, the program, everything. And I want to give him a shout out for it. So,
yeah, definitely a bold move. I mean, not a lot of guys are doing that. So kind of respect to him for kind of, trailblazing a different path here away from the Alabamas of the world. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We'll see if he can, we'll see if it propels him to, the NFL draft. We'll see if it helps his draft stock. We'll certainly see. We'll find out. But Trevor, I think
over the next 3 years or so.
Yeah, it'll take a while, but we'll see. And yeah, that about wraps it up. I don't have any shout outs, so I think that about does it. Yeah, it'll be fun watching some NFL games, NBA games this weekend, and early into next week with some Monday and Tuesday action. So we will see how that goes. And yeah, we'll check in next week with a new podcast after Christmas. So we'll see you then.
Merry Christmas. Go Suns.